This is Evan Woodbery with the Knoxville News Sentinel and Go Vols Extra. And this is our first month in review feature about UT football. And February 2013 was kind of an interesting month because for a time in which no football was actually played, it was pretty busy, beginning with the recruiting season and going up until an unexpected coaching change. And we're actually going to cheat by adding a few days in March to our February review just so we can squeeze that coaching change in. But we'll start at the beginning of the month. It was the final frantic few days of the recruiting season before National Signing Day, and Butch Jones and his staff were trying to put together the finishing touches on a class. And they had some swings and misses. Chongo Condola, who was a junior college offensive lineman, picked Nebraska over Tennessee. Earlier, they'd had another miss on the offensive line, and Dan Skipper went to Arkansas. So that stands as an issue they'll have to address in 2014 as far as getting some more linemen. Jonathan Ford took his last official visit to Auburn rather than UT, and that didn't look good for UT, so they started working on the East Carolina commit named Jabbo Lee, who ended up switching to Tennessee and filling the running back void in this class. Linebacker E.J. Levenberry, who had gotten a late push from Tennessee, ended up going to Florida State after they couldn't swing him at the last minute. So there were some hits and misses, and then on National Signing Day Eve, I think it was late, like 11 p.m., Butch Jones sends out this tweet, and it kind of got fans riled up because I think most people thought it was about Von Bell, this good news that he was receiving. Turns out it wasn't. Bell stunned just about everybody by going to Ohio State as part of a really strong class by Urban Meyer and his staff they put together, including getting a lot of guys from the South like Von Bell. So what was the big news for Butch Jones? It was the quarterback, Joshua Dobbs, who's from suburban Atlanta. He had been committed to Arizona State for a long time, and he switched on National Signing Day and picked Tennessee. And so that gave Tennessee a much-needed fourth quarterback going into the 2013 season and addressed a position of need for them. And most people are pretty high on Joshua Dobbs. But as it turned out, Tennessee signed a much smaller class than people expected, about 21 players. And they haven't added any more since National Signing Day, which many expected that they would have. So there's going to be focus on building a huge class in 2014, and they're going to have to load up on a lot of key positions of need, including both sides of the line. So the day after National Signing Day, the staff is exhausted. They've worked pretty much nonstop for a couple months, and they're up at 6 in the morning at the Knoxville airport and getting ready to fly to Memphis. They had 3 stops on kind of a post-signing day tour. They had Memphis, Nashville, Knoxville at Neyland Stadium, part of something that Tennessee used to do, kind of got away from doing under the last coaching staff, and Butch Jones was willing to bring it back and go out and meet the fans and kind of talk up this year's signing class. It was very well attended in all 3 places, very enthusiastic crowds. Butch Jones probably got the loudest cheers, but who was in second? That would be running backs coach Jay Graham. So that will be foreshadowing to what happens later in the month when we get there. But meanwhile, in non-recruiting news, there was news about Tennessee's former staff. Derek Dooley finally officially announced that he was going to the Dallas Cowboys, confirmed it on Twitter, where he had been pretty funny since his dismissal. I don't know if he'll keep doing it as a member of the Cowboys. But as a whole, his staff, for as maligned as it was at times, did a really nice job finding some jobs during this offseason. All but one of them are currently employed, and they landed some good jobs. Jim Chaney and Sam Pittman went to Arkansas, Sal Sinceri's at Florida State. Pittman, in fact, was in such high demand after helping Arkansas put the finishing touches on their recruiting class that he got a raise to $500,000 after Alabama came after him, so he's very well compensated. Unfortunately for Tennessee, Sunseri right now is only making about $200,000, which means UT is going to owe him a lot of money over the next 2 years, part of a lot of money that is going to be owed to this staff. Meanwhile, Butch Jones, his staff, they finally catch a breather after National Signing Day, got to spend some time with their families, got to help move some of their families down here after just that whirlwind move from Cincinnati after the season was over. But when they got back, the focus was on the current players, and it started with the Vol Olympics, which was something that Butch Jones did at Cincinnati. They draft teams, they select captains, and players can basically earn or lose points based on their performance in workouts, community service, academics, things of that nature. Players seemed pretty keen on it, and they actually had a Vol Olympics draft that they did NFL style. They all wore suits and ties. Um, they live casted it on utsports.com. So it's something they were very big on promoting, and a lot of players have talked about it since it occurred. In addition to the Fall Olympics, they're in that stage of the year where they can do 8 hours of individual workouts, really high intensity stuff. I guess their players kind of getting their first taste of Butch Jones and what his staff's going to be like. Butch referred to it as standard workouts as far as meeting the Tennessee standard, and even went so far as grading out players. If they did a subpar job, they were required to wear blue jerseys at the next workout. If they made the grade, they wore white. If they exceeded expectations, if they did a good job, they got to wear orange. So that created a little bit of competition as well, and had people online checking out photos to see which players were wearing which jerseys. Away from Tennessee, they had the NFL Combine later in the month. Cordero Patterson, Tyler Bray, Justin Hunter, Michael Rivera, all there, all participated. So really impressive representation for a team that didn't have a winning record last year. And then that doesn't even include Dallas Thomas, who was there but didn't participate because of an injury. And that doesn't even include the former Vols. Derek Rogers, Montori Hughes, Mike Edwards were also invited. They had been dismissed from the team at various stages over the last couple of years, with the most recent being Derek Rogers right before that 2012 season. So a well-represented turnout for UT, and by and large, I think Hunter and Patterson got some good reviews. Patterson, they said, was just a physical freak, although some suggested that his interviews didn't go as well. Even Tyler Bray, I think, turned some heads with his performance, with his pass-throwing ability. And people always forget about Dallas Thomas, but he's being projected as a second-round type guy. So let's get to the final part of the month, and that was on February 25th, and that was when the bombshell, at least bombshell for Knoxville standards, broke that Jay Graham was leaving UT, his alma mater, the place where he was a star running back, for Florida State. And there's been a lot of questions about why it happened. He was the second lowest paid coach on the team, but in fairness, he'd already been given a raise since coming on board with Butch Jones. He was slated to make another raise had he stayed at UT. So it wasn't like he was being underpaid, and I'm not sure he's going to make dramatically much more at Florida State. We'll have to wait and see when his salary is released. But I think part of it was just the comfort level that he had with Randy Sanders, who's now on the Florida State staff, was his longtime boss and mentor, was his position coach in college. It just seemed like a good fit in that respect. So after that, after Graham left, the search was on immediately. They had very little time to waste because spring practice was just around the corner. We know that Butch Jones talked to at least 3 candidates, one being Tim Spencer, who was a former longtime assistant for the Chicago Bears, also worked for Ohio State before that, former Ohio State great running back. Tony Ball of Georgia, who's very well respected in the league, has been with Mark Richt for a long time, and through that connection knew Willie Martinez and John Jancic, who are on UT's staff right now. And then the man that he ultimately hired, the coach that he ultimately hired, was Robert Gillespie of West Virginia. He'd previously been at Oklahoma State and South Carolina, and most fans remember him because he's a former Florida Gator football player and played a role in some really memorable Florida-Tennessee games, including that one in 2001 that Tennessee was about an 18-point underdog and ended up upsetting Florida, ruining any national championship hopes for them. So he definitely has a SEC track record that a lot of fans are familiar with, and most people seem pretty pleased with the hire. So that brings us to the very end of a very busy month of February. Spring football just around the corner is scheduled to begin March 9th. And really for the first time in Butch Jones' tenure, we'll have some actual football stuff to talk about rather than recruiting and staff building and all that sort of thing. So if you want the latest on spring football, we'll have daily coverage. On Tennessee Beat is my Twitter handle. You can check me out on Facebook as well. And, of course, read all of our coverage at GoVolsExtra.com.